Okay, 4.1 part 2, representing percents greater than 100%, less than 1%, and fractional percents. So the show you know on page 125, one completely shaded grid represents 100%. So what does each diagram represent? I have two completely shaded in grids, 100% plus 100%, 200%, plus 48% of the third grid shaded in, 200 plus 48 is going to give me, you guessed it, 248%. B, if I have a fractional percent of less than 1, then I'm going to break it down into parts and show the shaded part of less than 1%. So here it's out of 4 squares. I have 1 square shaded in, 1/4%. And C, I have some completely shaded in squares and then a partially shaded in square. So I'm going to count the number of completely shaded in squares: 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 71, 72, 73, 74, and a partially shaded in square. So they've enlarged it to show me what it's out of and how much is shaded in. So I have broken it down into 10 squares in total. 8 squares are shaded in. We have 74 and 0.8%. We can have fractions in our percent now when only a fraction of the square is shaded in. So that word I've been using, fractional percent. A fractional percent is a percent that includes a portion of a percent. So it's less than 1%, such as 0.5%, or 0.42%, 7 3/8%, 125%, and 3/4%, or 4.5. This is a fractional percent. So 0.5% is a fractional percent between 0% and 1%. You're going to zoom in a square to represent on a 100 grid. Since 0.5 represents 1/2%, I'm going to shade in one of 2 sections on a square, like this. Or I can have 18 3/4% is a fractional percent between 1% and 100%. So using a 100 grid, I'm going to shade in 18 squares to represent 18%, and then 3/4 of another square to represent 3/4. So I've magnified a square here, or the textbook has, made it out of 4, shaded in 3 squares to show 18 3/4%, or 18.75%. My computer's lagging a little bit. Okay, so your assignment today is to complete 4.1 pink booklet work. Remembering that to represent a percent, you can shade squares of a grid of 100 squares called a 100 grid. Completely shaded in the grid represents 100%. So this is 45% of a 100 grid. You can represent percent greater than 100% by shading in more than one grid. So 100% plus 70, 170%. To represent a fractional percent between 0% and 1%, shade in part of the square. So I've shaded it in 1 part out of 3. This is 1/3%. And I can represent a fractional percent greater than 1% by shading in the 100 grid whole numbers first, and then shading in 1 square to show the fraction. So 75 little squares here, plus 1/3 of a square is shaded in. All right. You now have time to complete your pink booklet, all of 4.1, and hand it into the bin. I will be marking that. And also check your understanding and then work on the practice and apply questions in your textbook on page 128, you will be completing questions 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then skipping to 12 and 14. And these questions are listed in your notes as well as what you need to complete and the slideshow. One last thing before I let you get to work. In question 6 here, it says represent each percent on a grid. I have there we go. I have here question C, 0.4%. So it is less than 1%. So I'm in shading in a grid. I'm shading in only one square on a 100 chart. And I have 0.4% of a single square to shade in. So how do I make this into a fraction like these other questions over here? Like B and C with their little fraction magnified. 0.4% is in the decimal is in the tenths. So it's the same as saying 4 out of 10. Because I look at place value. Make sure you're using your place value charts in your interactive notebook. So 0.4% is a tenth, is the same as saying 4 out of 10%. So I'm going to draw my square, my one square of my hundreds chart. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And I'm going to shade in 4 parts of the whole square to represent